Great evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us again on another exciting Upgrade Mastery just for you. Yes, this is another Upgrade Mastery just for you with Mr. Upgrade, and I'm super excited that we're here again. We're here to continue our series, which we started like 2 weeks ago, and it has been an amazing exposition so far on this series. Just in case you have missed the previous learnings from this series, I would encourage you. In fact, I will appeal to you that you go back and watch the previous episode on this series. This series on Joseph is mind blowing. Like, literally, it is mind blowing because there's so many lessons that we're sharing from this series that is very practicable and applicable that you should be aware of because it relates to your own life. So the story that we picked up to look at is not just a story in the Bible, but the story that is very relatable in our world today. Guys, if you have missed the previous two parts, part one, part two of Joseph, please don't even start this one yet. Just pause on this, go back and watch part one and part two before you come and watch this. You know why? So you can understand the trend and the flow of thought for the conversation. Because just watching this, you may not understand where we are coming from because we are on a journey on this series, right? So I encourage you, go back, watch the previous two parts. Part one, there were 6 amazing lessons we shared from that one. Then part two, there were 10 amazing lessons we shared in part two. And now there's part 3. And guess what? There are 5 amazing lessons to learn from this part 3. So I want to encourage you to please, previously on Joseph, go back and watch it. Right? You know how they do in this movie series. You just say previously on, you now go back. Yes. So I want you to go back previously and catch up. Right? I would have loved to do a review. Scratch that. I'll just do a quick review, but you need to go back and watch it. Right? So from part 1, we start talking about the story of Joseph. And we took our text from the scripture in Genesis 37, right? Genesis 37, that was the first time the scripture talk about Joseph, right? It exposes us to who Joseph was, how old he was, how the father loved him differently from his other brothers, and all of those things, right? So we begin to build on that about the lessons from Joseph. And we shared there were 6 amazing lessons to learn from that part. Part 1, we talked about Joseph's personal values. He had personal values as a person, right? He had accountability, integrity, attention to detail. Please go listen up and watch part 1. You see all of the breakdown of those his values. Second lesson, we learned about love, which was a case in parenting. Why is it important that parents should not treat any of their child differently to make that one seem special than the others? Right? That was a very good case in parenting. We saw what Joseph got as a result of the love the father had for him. He had a coat of many colors and all of that. And the brothers hated him because of that, even before he started having the dreams. So that was a classical case in parenting that you should understand. Never make any of your child feel less loved than the others or feel more loved than the others, right? As much as the lies between you, love all of them equally. Third lesson was about dream and interpretation. And we saw there that it wasn't just peculiar to Joseph to have dream. From the tribe he belongs to, being a offspring of Jacob, dream and interpretation are something that flows in that lineage. So it's not something really fantastic or special to Joseph. So we saw about dreams and interpretation. Then we saw another lesson about hate. And we saw that the brothers, they hated him with their words and with their actions. In fact, they said, let us kill him and see what will become of his dream. That's how much they hated him. And then we saw a lesson of trauma, pain, and hurt. Joseph seeing his own brothers selling him into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. Like literally. He saw himself being sold into slavery by his own brothers. and being taken away from Canaan into Egypt, a strange land. There's the trauma, there's the hurt, there's the pain. And then we saw lesson number 6, the lesson of mercy. And we said God showed mercy to Joseph, that he was not just sold to the general slave market, he was sold to Potiphar. That was an act of mercy. They said they were going to kill him, but they did not kill him. Instead, they sold him. That was an act of mercy, right? And we said sometimes the act of mercy may not come in the way you think is an act of mercy. But if you look at it in hindsight, it's an act of mercy. If they had killed Joseph, how would Joseph have been able to interpret Pharaoh's dream to sustain the world? So not killing Joseph was an act of mercy to preserve Joseph. And we're going to see more about that as we continue in this part 3. Then we'll move over to part 2, where we share about 10 amazing lessons. And I love part 2 so much. Please, if you can, go watch part 2 again. I love part 2. Because see, we shared 10 amazing lessons in part 2. And lesson number 1 in part 2 was about the presence. And we started part 2 from Genesis 39. So from Genesis 39 to Genesis 41 was what we compressed into part 2. Right? For part 3, we're going to look at Genesis 42 to Genesis 45. That's what we'll compress into part 3. And we hope most likely we'll conclude this in part 4, and that will be the end for Joseph's story. I love this story, man. I don't want it to end, but come on. You have to move on to other things, right? Are you enjoying this series so far? I am loving it. I don't know about you. I'm learning a lot. I'm seeing how practicable these things are, right? So part 2 of Joseph, we talked about the presence. Scripture tells us in Genesis 39 verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. And we also see there that the presence of God was with him. That was one major thing we pointed out in part 2, presence. Second lesson in part 2 was evidence. The presence produced evidence. So there would always be a rub-off of the presence, because Potiphar noticed that because of Joseph, his house was being blessed. And we talked about the same thing that happened with Obed-Edom when the Ark of the Covenant was in his house for 3 months and he prospered. So the presence always have evidence. And I told us last week that it's only fools that argue with proof. Third thing we learned in Joseph part 2 was favor. Lesson number 3 was favor. You know, favor, he surrounds me like a shield. Joseph found favor in the sight of his leader, Potiphar. He found favor in the sight of the prison warden, right? Joseph found favor. That is something that you need to understand. Because in this story, we see presence, we see evidence, we see favor, right? And then, lesson number 4 was discipline. When Potiphar's wife came throwing herself at Joseph, Joseph said, nah, I ain't going to do that, man. I ain't going to do that. That's not me. I ain't doing this. He had the discipline. He said, how can I do this great sin and wickedness before God? That was Joseph understanding the role of discipline as a personal trait that he had. He was willing to say no to the immediate for what he had in the ultimate. Lesson number 5 was that Joseph had emotional intelligence. And we told you that while he was in prison, he was able to spot that the butler and the baker were down and depressed. And he asked them, what's wrong? And they said they had dreams. Both of them had a dream each. And then Joseph said, no problem. Tell me the dream and I'll be able to tell you the interpretation. And they did. And true to Joseph's interpretation, the dream came to pass. And Joseph had told the butler, perhaps when you get out there, remember me. But guess what? He forgot about him. He forgot about him. Right? He forgot about him. So Joseph had emotional intelligence. And then we talked about that man can't help you except God helps you. Right? That was the lesson, the help from God. Joseph had told the butler to remember him, but the butler forgot. 2 years, the butler forgot. And then we see the other lesson that God never forgets. As 2 years passed, Pharaoh now had a dream. Pharaoh had the dream. None of the magicians or the wise men could interpret the dream. This is when the butler now remembered that, oh, I remember my fault this day. There was an Hebrew in the prison while we're in prison, and he interpreted our dreams. So they sent for Joseph. Lesson number 8, presentation matters. When Joseph heard that Pharaoh sent for him, Joseph took his time, he shaved, he changed his robes, and then he went to appear before Pharaoh. Like I always say, you cannot dress like a suspect and expect people to treat you like a prospect. Lesson number 9, solution and implementation. Joseph did not only just interpret the dream, he gave Pharaoh a solution and the implementation for the solution. That's why he became prime minister. So it's not just enough to say you can interpret dream. What's the solution? What's the implementation? Joseph gave both. That's why he was relevant. If not, they would have just made him a free man and sent him back to his hometown. And lesson number 10, trials don't last forever. All that Joseph went through was for 13 good years. 13 good years. It wasn't just suddenly. But like I said, trials don't last forever. For 13 years, he was going through pit, Potiphar, prison, and now eventually in the palace. So this is it. This was just a wrap-up of part 1, part 2. Are you excited about this? Now let's get into part 3. This is lessons from Joseph, right? The story of Joseph, part 3. Now we're going to look at this part 3 from the perspective of Genesis 42 to Genesis 45. There's so much that is here for us to unpack. But interestingly, it's just 5 lessons that summarizes all that we're going to unpack in part 3. But these 5 lessons carry weight. Like Odogu, they carry weight. So pay attention. Don't go anywhere. Share this with your friends, your family, your loved ones, so that they can learn the same way you are learning on the Upgrade Mastery just for you. I love this session, guys. I love this session because it's so much mind-blowing, right? It's more like Bible study, but it's mind-blowing because it's really practical to our everyday life. So let's get into Joseph part 3, right? So let's get to part 3. So begin this part 3 from, okay, a minute, guys. Give me a minute. Sorry for the break in transmission. We are back, right? So I was trying to start out 1802. So we are back. So lesson from Joseph, part 3, right? Part 3. This is again something, right? It's again something. Okay, so let's begin from Genesis chapter 42, right? Let me go to my Bible app. Let's begin the story because there's something that I really need you to see here. So now, when Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you look at one another? For he said, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. get down there and buy grain for us that we may live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brethren went to buy grain in Egypt. Now, I said I'm going to just throw lights here, but this is not part of the lessons. But this just tells us that people will always go towards where they think there is food. And by food, our natural implication for today talks about green pasture, right? Where they were in Canaan, there was the famine had started, right? But they heard that Egypt was having food. Egypt had greener pastures, so to speak, and then they were going to go to Egypt. How does that relate to us today? People want to japa. People want to go to other countries, feeling like where they are, for those of you who are in Nigeria, feel like where they are in Nigeria is not beneficial, in quotes, is not productive, in quotes, enough for them. Right? So they are going to where food is. Now, I'm not against you traveling. I'm not against you relocating. I'm not against you jackbarring. But the thing is, have in mind, what's sending you there? Because if it's just for food, you may end up being a slave there. That's what happened to Israel, right? They left for food and they stayed there. And then they became slaves there. That's another story entirely. So be careful where you're going to for greener pastures. Are we still together? Okay, so let's make progress as we get into the lessons from Joseph part 3. Now, so the sons of Israel came to buy. Okay, let me backtrack. So the 10 of Joseph's brothers went to buy grain in Egypt. So this is 10 of them outside of Benjamin, right? Benjamin, Joseph, and 10 others made it 12 sons of Jacob. Now, but Benjamin, Joseph's full brother, did not send, just Jacob did not send with his brothers, for he said, lest perhaps some harm or injury will befall him. You know, what has happened before when he sent Joseph and Joseph never came back. So he said, nah, I ain't sending Benjamin with you guys. You guys go alone. Benjamin stay with me. Right? Jacob is like once bitten, twice shy. I ain't going to send anybody with you guys. You guys go alone. Benjamin stays with me and we'll be here waiting for you guys to come back. So the sons of Joseph came to buy grain among those who came. So other people also came to buy grain. For there was hunger and general lack of food in the land of Canaan. So they weren't the only ones who went. Just the same way Jacob wasn't the only one who heard that there was grain in Egypt. Every other person heard it. You know, news flies all around. Like there is now. People are going to Canada. People are going to America. People are going to UK. There's greener pastures elsewhere outside of Nigeria. The news is everywhere. People are moving. Right? Now, verse 6. Joseph was the governor over the land. And it was who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's half brothers came and bowed themselves down before him with their faces toward the ground. Lesson number 1. This is the first lesson that we learned from Joseph, part 3. Lesson number 1. Can you guess the lesson? I know you're already trying to guess. Can you guess the lesson? Let me see. Can you guess the lesson? The lesson is this. Dream do come true. Yes, that's the lesson. Dream come true. You know, remember the dream that Joseph had? That his brothers, they bowed to him when they interpreted the dream and said, do you mean that we're going to bow to you? That dream that he had, the very first dream he had, which made them hate him, had just come to pass. What does this tell you? Even though your dream may tarry, may take a while, if you hold on, it will come to pass. Literally, dream come through. The only dream that will not come true is the one that you stop having. As long as you have the dream, it will come true. While Joseph was thrown in the pit, he still had his dream with him. While he was in Potiphar's house as a slave, he still had the dream with him. While he was sent to prison, he still had the dream with him. While he became prime minister, he still had the dream with him. And suddenly, one day, his own brothers, the 10 of them, they came to buy food and they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. That dream that Joseph had, the first dream he had in Genesis 37, had finally come true. So the lesson to learn from this is simple. Dream come true. Dream come true. Dream come true. So regardless of the things you are going through in your life, dream will come through. Once you have this consciousness, it helps you. Knowing that it may not look like it right now, but I'm not going to give up on my dream. I'm going to hold on to my dream until my dream come true. Who would have thought? Joseph thought. Yes, he thought. He knew. And finally, that dream had come true. I tell people, when Joseph became prime minister was not when the dream came true. The dream came true when the brothers, they bowed their faces to the ground before him. That was when the first dream came true. Are you getting this? So this is to let you know that regardless of what you're going through, regardless of the difficulties, regardless of the challenges, regardless of how life looks right now, as long as you have a dream, hold on to that dream because your dream will come true. If you don't give up, if you don't quit, your dream will eventually come true. Are you understanding this? So the first lesson that I want you to learn from Joseph part 3 is this: dream come true. This took a while. This took 13 years. And then you add also the 7 years of abundance. That make it 20 years, 2 decades. Because this was the second year of the famine. That's when the brothers came to buy food. At the second year. Because you see down the line, Joseph now told his father and said, this is just the second year of the famine. There's still 5 more years to go. So all of you need to migrate and leave Canaan and come to Egypt. But we're going to get there. So this tells us that it took Joseph 22 years for his dream to come true. 22 years. So are you willing to hold on to your dream for that long? 13 years from prison, from pit to prison, from pit to Potiphar's house to prison to palace. 13 years. 7 years as governor. Then 2 years in the years of famine. Then the brothers came to buy food. Then they bowed before him. The dream eventually came true after 22 years. He says a long time. Yes. Like I told you, trials don't last forever. The years in which Joseph was prime minister was longer than the years he was going from pit to Potiphar's house to prison. Are you getting this? So the years you will go through the trials, the challenges, and the difficulties is not the years that you cannot be compared to the years you will have the fulfillment of the dream. That's why scripture calls it our light affliction, which is but for a moment. Worketh in us a far more exceeding weight of glory. Is light affliction. Yes, 13 years is light affliction. Lesson number 1, dream come true. First lesson, and it's an amazing lesson. So let me read through scripture again and show you what they say. He says, Now Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land, and Joseph's half brothers came and bowed themselves down before him with their faces to the ground. Dream come true. Now let's go to lesson number 2, right? Because this is a very, very interesting conversation. Like this conversation, very interesting, very eye-opening, very revealing. And you must pay attention to this because it relates to even you. So regardless of what you're going through right now, hold on, because your dream will come true. Lesson number 2, recognition. Now, I love this lesson just like the first one because you see, people who do you wrong, people who do you evil, people who treat you anyhow, they may forget. But you, the receiver, you will never forget. See what happens next. Joseph saw his brothers and he recognized them. He saw his brothers and he recognized them. But he treated them as if he were a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. He said, "Where do you come from?" And they replied, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." Joseph knew his brothers, but they did not know him. See, this lesson is very deep. People who did you, the people who do you dirty, they may forget that they ever did anything to you. But you, the receiver of the dirt they did to you, you never will forget. You hold on to it. You will always remember. Joseph, it was still very fresh in his mind the day they tore his coat of many colors off him. They put him in a pit and they sold him into slavery. He could still remember that picture. But they had forgotten. Because remember, 22 years. 22 years, guys. Not 1 day, not 2 days, not 3 days, not 1 year, not 2 years. 22 years, that's 2 decades. And 2 extra years have passed. So they have forgotten it. They have even got married. They have even had their own children. They have forgotten if Joseph ever existed. So then, Joseph was dead. Because they never expected that Joseph would amount to anything. Remember what they said earlier in chapter 37. They said, "Let us kill him and see what will become of his dream." So by the time they were selling him off to slavery, in their mind, they have killed him. And nothing will become of his dream. Because that's why they killed an animal and put the blood on his coat and took the coat to their father and said Joseph was dead. So to them, Joseph was dead. But Joseph recognized them. Joseph recognized them. But they did not recognize him. A very important lesson to learn from this is recognition. See, how this also applies to us in our daily lives. Recognize people. That's why Paul said in scripture, "Know no man according to the flesh." Know no man according to the flesh. Don't look at people based on who they are. Don't look at them less based on who they are. Look at who they can be. They never expected that Joseph would amount to anything. They never did. So then Joseph was dead and gone. But God was not done with Joseph. God was taking Joseph through the process. Joseph had recognition. He could remember his brothers. He knew all of them, even though they could not recognize him. Because in their wildest dream, Joseph will not become the governor. Not Joseph. Not our own Joseph. No, it's not possible. How is that possible? Because they had killed his dream and they felt nothing would become out of Joseph. So then Joseph is done and dusted. But God wasn't through with Joseph. God has not even started with him yet. But they had concluded about Joseph. But God wasn't done. God wasn't done with Joseph. The same way people may have concluded about you and feeling like this is it for you. Nothing will come out of your life. But I'm here to remind you, that's not the end. Who is it that said the thing and it comes to pass when the Lord has not said it? That's not the end. There's still more to your life. And you must have that as a consciousness that your life doesn't end like this. And then when that time comes, also be able to recognize those people who had wished you would never amount to anything. He had the recognition. So Joseph did not forget himself because he was now prime minister. He didn't forget himself because he was now governor. He still had his senses to remember that these are his brothers, even though they cannot recognize him. Because the difference between the Joseph they knew and this governor was the difference like the difference between night and day. You cannot put it together. You cannot, like, how do you compare Joseph, governor? How? Lesson number 3. They never expected Joseph to amount to anything. They never expected Joseph to be great. But their expectations, God exceeded it. God blew their mind. The same Joseph that they felt would not amount to anything, the same Joseph that they felt they had killed his dream, was now living his dream. And that same Joseph had recognition of the people who had told him he won't amount to anything. People who had told him that this is the end for him. He could recognize them. So the second lesson in Joseph part 3 is recognition. Never get to the point where you cannot recognize those who treated you anyhow. Recognize them. It doesn't mean you pay back evil for evil, no, but you recognize them. It's important. It's important. I don't have selective amnesia towards those people who wish you evil. Remember them, recognize them, and be grateful to God that their plans they meant for evil, God turned it around for good. So lesson number 2, recognition. Right? Recognition. So this takes us to lesson number 3, a very important lesson to learn in number 3. And this is a very practical life lesson, lesson number 3. I hope that you guys will get this and understand it. Lesson number 3 is this: repercussion. Repercussion. Now, why is this an important lesson to learn? Because actions have consequences. There's always a repercussion. Yes, God will forgive you and have mercy, but sometimes you still need to face the repercussion for what you did. Samson's hair began to grow again, but Samson did not have his sight again. There's repercussion. Never forget that. Never forget that. There's repercussion. When Joseph is now prime minister, Potiphar is now under Joseph. I can imagine how Potiphar's wife would have felt seeing Joseph as the number 2 person in the whole of Egypt. After Pharaoh, it was Joseph. Repercussion. And Joseph did not go back to treat her fuck up or treat her mess up or deal with her. No. You have moved on. But there's repercussion. There's repercussion. And the brothers were the first to be hit with this repercussion of what their actions were. We'll read further so you see what I'm talking about. Joseph knew his brethren, but they did not know him. And Joseph remembered the dream he had dreamt about them and said to them, "You are spies, and with unfriendly purpose you have come to observe secretly the nakedness of the land." But they said to him, "No, my lord, but your servants have come only to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. Your servants are not spies." And he said to them, "No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land." But they said, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest is today with our father, and one is not." And Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. You shall be proved by this test. by the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go away from here unless your youngest brother come here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you'll be kept in prison, that your words may be proved whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh you certainly are spies. Then he put all of them in custody for 3 days. And Joseph said to them on the 3rd day, do this and leave. I reverence and fear God. If you are true men, let one of your brothers be bound in your prison, but the rest of you go and carry grain for those you're weakened with hunger in your household. But bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified and you shall live. And they did so. And they said to one another, we are truly guilty about our brother, for we saw the distress and anguish of his soul when he begged us not to let him go, and we would not hear. So this distress and difficulty has come upon us. Are you seeing the repercussion? They are remembering Joseph as a 17-year-old boy when he was pleading and said, please don't sell me, please don't sell me, please. He was pleading, but they didn't listen. He said, we saw the distress and the anguish of his soul when he begged us not to let him go. We would not hear. So this distress and difficulty has come upon us. Reuben answered them, did I not tell you, do not sin against the boy, and you will not hear? Therefore, behold, his blood is required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned away from them and wept. And he returned to them and talked to them, and took from them Simeon and bound him before their eyes. Then privately, Joseph commanded that all their sacks be filled with grain, every man's money be restored to his sack, and provisions be given them for their journey. And this was done. He loaded their donkeys with grain and left. So as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he caught sight of his money, for behold, it was in his sack mouth. And he said to his brothers, my money is restored. It is in my sack. And their hearts failed them, and they were afraid and turned trembling to one another. What is this that God has done to us? Repercussion. And when they came to Jacob, their father in Canaan, they told him all that had befallen them, saying, the man who is the Lord of the land spoke roughly to us and took us for spies of the country. And we said to him, we are true men, not spies. We are 12 brothers with the same father. One is no more, and the youngest is today with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, by this test will I know whether or not you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here and take grain for your famishing households and be gone. Bring your youngest brother to me, then I will know that we are not spies, but that you are honest men. And I will deliver you your brother, whom I have kept bound in prison, and you may do business in the land. When they emptied their sack, behold, every man's parcel of money was in the sack. When both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and he will take Benjamin from me. All these things are against me. And Reuben said to his father, slay my 2 sons, if I do not bring back Benjamin to you. Deliver him into your keeping, and I will bring him back to you. But Jacob said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children. If harm or accident should befall him on the journey you are to take, you would bring me hairy head down to Sheol with grief. You see, this part of the story just lets us know the repercussion that came as a result of what they did to Joseph. He said, Joseph begged us, but we did not listen. Now, look at what is happening to us. The evil that we have done in time past have come before us. See, guys, as much as there's the mercy of God, understand that there are some things that has repercussion. That's why scripture says that shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. There is repercussion. So don't play down, oh, what I'm doing, God will forgive me, God will have mercy. Yes, He will, but there's repercussion because you cannot continue in sin and expect grace to abound. Now, lesson number 4. I love lesson number 4 very much because it's the essence of the nature of God and it's the essence of everything that has happened so far in this story. Family. Lesson number 4 is family. You know, when you go over to chapter 43, they were still in hunger, and then the food that they had bought the first time had run out. And Jacob said, okay, you can now take Benjamin with you and go and buy food. See, what going to get food will do. You know, this just reminds you that sometimes some of your decisions, ensure they are not hinged on greener pastures. Because you do some things you never would have done just because you want food. And food here is not literally food, it's greener pastures, sustenance, things that will keep you going. But the fourth lesson we learn from Joseph, remember I told you just 5 lessons. But this fourth lesson is the lesson of family. As much as all that they did to Joseph, Joseph was still a person that had the concept of family. Notice that when he sold food to them in chapter 41, he put their money back into their sack. He told his servants to put their money, each man's money, back into their sack and loaded their sack with food. He still had the concept and the mindset of family. And just something I said here that I wish you always remember. Please write it down. Family may not treat you right, but that doesn't mean you will not treat family right. I'll say that again. Family may not treat you right, but that doesn't mean you will not treat family right. They didn't treat Joseph right, but Joseph made up his mind to treat family right. He made up his mind that regardless of what has happened, he would treat family right. Yes, he was talking to them rudely, so they would not know who he was, but he was still having compassion towards them. At one point, he cried. He left their presence and went to cry, and then came back again. I was still acting all bossy. But deep down, Joseph understood that these guys are family. Even though family will not treat me right, that doesn't mean I will not treat family right. See, if you don't learn anything from this part 3, please learn this. I know some people have come from broken homes, or some people are from broken homes, but that is not enough to not treat family right if you have the opportunity and the privilege to. Regardless of what they did to you, Joseph understood the family over anything. He put his family first. He treated his family right. Even when he had not revealed himself to them that he was Joseph, he still treated them right. He gave them food. He gave them their money. He treated them well. He made provisions for them. He treated family right, even though family did not treat him right. He treated family right. So you have no excuse to say, oh, but they didn't take care of me. Oh, they didn't treat me right. No. No excuse is good enough. As much as it lies within you, even though family don't treat you right, you should still treat family right. Especially if you are privileged. Especially if you now have the wherewithal to do it, you should treat family right. And we learned this from Joseph. He still treats his family right. even though they didn't treat him right. So you see that in chapter 42. Sorry, 43 now. Chapter 43, we just finished chapter 42. So you see that in chapter 43. But the hunger and the destitution and starvation were severe and extremely depressing and stressing in the land of Canaan. And when the families of Jacob saw that eating up all the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again and buy food for us." But Judah said, the man solemnly and sternly warned us, saying, "You shall not see my face again until your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we'll go down to Egypt to buy food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man has said, you shall not see my face unless with your brother that's with you." And Israel said, "Why do you do me this wrong and suffering that this evil will come upon me, telling the man that you had another brother?" And they said, "The man asked us straightforward questions about ourselves and our relative. He said, 'Is your father still alive? Have you another brother?' And we answered him accordingly. How could we know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down here'?" And Judah said to Israel, his father, remember, Judah means praise. He says, "Send the lad with me, and I will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I will be security for him. You buy him of me personally. If I do not bring him back to you and put him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we were not lingered like this, surely by now we would have returned the second time." And their father said, Israel said to them, "If it must be so, now do this. Take choice products of the land in your sack and carry down the present to the man, a little balm, a little honey, aromatic spices, and gum of laudanum, pisho nuts, and almond. And take double the grain money with you, the money that were put back in your sack from the last time, and there's a possibility that it was an oversight. Now take your brother and arise and return to the man. May God Almighty give you mercy and favor before the man, that he may release you. He may release to you your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved of my sons, I am bereaved." And then the men took the present, and they took the double money with them and Benjamin, and they arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Bring the men into the house and kill an animal and make ready, for the men will dine with me at noon." And the man did as Joseph ordered and brought the men into Joseph's house. The men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, "We are brought in because of the money that was returned in our sacks the first time we came, so that he may find occasion to accuse and assail us and take us for slaves and seize our donkeys." So they came near to the steward of Joseph's house and talked with him at the door of the house. And they said, "Oh, sir, we came down truly the first time to buy food. And when we came to the inn, we opened our sack, and there was each man's money, full weight, returned in the mouth of his sack. And now we have brought it back again." You see, over time, the brothers have become honest. They have learned, they have grown over time. They were no longer those brothers that sold Joseph into slavery. They have learned their lesson. They have become quite different. They were now honest. Joseph was literally testing them. Right? But the steward said, "Peace be to you. Fear not. Your God and the God of your father has given you your treasure in your sack. I received your money." And he brought Simeon to them. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and and gave their donkey provenders. And they made ready the present that they had brought for Joseph before his coming at noon, for the head that he were to dine there. And when Joseph came, he brought into the house to him the present which they had with them, and they bowed themselves to the ground again. Remember the dream? They bowed down again. And he asked them of their welfare and said, "Is your old father well, of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" And they answered, "Your servant, our father, is in good health. he's still alive, and they bowed their heads and made obeisance. The third time they are bowing down to him, dream do come true. And he looked up and saw his full brother Benjamin, his mother, other son, and said, "Is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." And Joseph hurried from the room, for his heart yearned for his brother, and he sought privacy to weep. So he entered his chamber and wept there. And he washed his face and he went out, restraining himself, and said, "Let dinner be served." And the servant set out the food by himself, and for his brothers, and for themselves, and for the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, according to the Egyptian custom, not to eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And Joseph's brothers were given seats before him, the eldest according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another, amazed that so much was known about them. Joseph took and sent helpings to them before him, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of the others, and they drank freely and were merry with him. You see, in all of this, Joseph still treated them as family. But he hasn't revealed himself to them yet, but he still treated them as family. So lesson number 4, family. Family. And now this takes us to lesson number 5, which is the last lesson for today. And I'm just loving this session. I'm just loving this session. Lesson number 5 is the part where is the big one. And the big one is the reveal, where Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers. Now, all this while, they never knew. They never could have imagined. They never could have guessed. At this point, Joseph is about to let the cat out of the bag and let them know that he's Joseph, their brother that they sold 22 years ago. Are you getting this? This story is just mind-blowing. 22 years after. See, don't look at what you are going through and say your life is done for. No, it's not. It is not. As long as you are still in the will and the purpose of God for your life. Jeremiah 29:11, the Message translation, it says, "I know what I'm doing. I have it all planned out. I will take care of you. I will not abandon you. I will give you the future that you hope for." That's God speaking. And that happened for Joseph. 22 years after, he was the one that his own brothers are bowing down to and making obeisance to. The same Joseph, they said 22 years ago, "Let us kill him and see what will become of his dream." See, nobody can kill your dream. The only person who can kill your dream is you. So lesson number 5, the reveal. Right? I'll just go through the chapter and tell you what I really want you to learn from this lesson number 5, which is the reveal. Because in this reveal, you're going to see that Joseph had emotional intelligence. You're also going to see that Joseph had forgiveness and mercy towards his brothers. And also, Joseph did not allow them to feel shame and guilt because of what they did to him. This is so much to learn. So much to learn. Now, there are people who make other people feel bad because they treated them bad before. Joseph didn't do that. He didn't allow his brothers to feel shame and guilt based on what they did to him. He showed them forgiveness and mercy because they felt that they were done for when they realized that it was Joseph. They felt that it was over for them. And Joseph had emotional intelligence towards them. He treated them right. The same way he had emotional intelligence towards the butler and the baker. He had emotional intelligence towards his own brothers. See, man, this story here is just fascinating. It's just fascinating, guys. This is more than a Bible story. It's just fascinating to see that this is how you are expected to live your life. This is a template for you. This makes a lot of sense, guys. This makes a lot of sense. Like this tense is tensing. So Genesis chapter 44, and I'm going to read this quickly because I need to finish this at 45, then explain more. And he commanded the steward to go, the steward of his house, saying, fill this man's sack with food as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sack's mouth. The same thing again. And put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest with his great money. And the steward did according to what Joseph had said. And as soon as the money was light, the men were sent away, they and their donkey. And when they had left the city and were not far away, Joseph said to the steward, up, follow after them, and when you overtake them, say, why have you rewarded evil for good? Why have you stolen the silver cup? Is it not my master's drinking cup with which he divines the future? You have done wrong in doing this. And the steward overtook them and said to them these same words. And they said to him, why does my Lord say these things? Be it far from your servant to do such thing. Note that the money which we found in the mouth of our sack, we brought them back to you from the land of Canaan. Is it likely then that we will steal from your master's house silver or gold? With whom? With whomever of your servants your master's cup is found, not only let that one die, but the rest of us will be your Lord's slave. Hasty conclusion. But we're not going to look at that for today. We're making hasty conclusions. Be careful. Don't make conclusions in haste. Right? Don't feel like you trust yourself so much. Be coming down. Be coming down. Tell yourself, coming down. Right? And the steward said, now, let it be as you have said. He with whom the cup is found shall be my slave, or the rest of you shall be blameless. Then quickly every man lowered his sack to the ground, and every man opened his sack. And the steward searched, beginning from the eldest and stopping with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. And then they rent their clothes. And after each man had loaded his donkey again, they returned to the city. Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was still there. And then they prostrate before him. The fourth time now they are bowing before him. They prostrate before him. Joseph said to them, what is this thing that you have done? Do you not realize that such a man as I can certainly detect and know by divination everything you do without other knowledge of it? And Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? They are calling him Lord. What shall we reply? Or how shall we clear ourselves, since God has found out and exposed the iniquity of your servant? Behold, we are your Lord's slaves, the rest of us, as well as he with whom the cup is found. But Joseph said, God forbid that I should do that. But the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for the rest of you, you shall go in peace to your father. Then Judah came close to Joseph and said, O my Lord, let your servant, I pray you, speak a word to you in private, and let not your anger blaze over your servant, for you are as Pharaoh, so I will speak it directly to you. You see, let me not even digress. Let's just continue. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. And his brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother offspring, and his father loves him. And you said to your servant, bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. And we said to my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should do so, my father would die. And you told your servant, unless the youngest come with you, you shall not see my face again. And we went back to your servant, my father, and we told him what the Lord has said. And our father said, go again and buy us food. But we said, we cannot go down if the youngest brother is not with us. Then we will go down, for we may not see the man's face except our youngest brother is with us. And your servant, my father, said to us, you know that Rachel, my wife, bore me 2 sons. And the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. And if you take this son also from me, and harm or accident befall him, you will down my gray hairs with sorrows and evil to the place of death. Now, therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, not with us, since his life is bound up in this lad's life, and is so neat with this lad, so when he sees that the lad is not with us, he will die, and your servant will be responsible for his death, and will bring down the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to hell. For your servant became security for the lad of my father, saying, if I do not bring him to you, then I will be blamed of my father forever. I will bear the blame to my father forever. Now, therefore, I pray you, let your servant remain instead of the youths to be slave to my Lord, and let the young man go home with his half brothers. For how can I go up to my father if he not with me, lest I witness the woe and the evil that will come upon my father? You see, Joseph had realized that these his brothers, they have really, really changed. It's not the same brothers who sold him 22 years ago. A lot has happened to them. Life has happened to them. They have become more mature. They are now taking responsibility. Joseph was literally amazed that the brothers could stand up for Benjamin as against the last time when they were willing to sell him. The truth is this: time changes people if people are willing to change with time. I'll say that again. Time changes people if people are willing to change with time. So this revealing is not about Joseph revealing himself. The brothers also revealed their true self now. They were not like they used to be in the time past. A lot has changed about them. A lot has changed about them. Chapter 45. Let's quickly run through that as we are beginning to wrap this up. Then Joseph could not restrain himself any longer before all who stood by him. And he called out, because every man to go out from him. He told everybody to leave him. So no one stood near with him while he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept and sobbed aloud. And the Egyptians who had left him heard it. And the household of Pharaoh also heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Hey, I love to watch this scene in a movie when Joseph will say, I am Joseph. God. Oh my God. The special effect in that part will be gang. Like gang. They are driving everybody away. Just his brothers and him. And then he removed his robe. He removed that his headgear as the prince of Egypt. He removed it. And then he said, I am Joseph. Oh my word. What an epic reveal. He says, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? And his brothers could not reply, for they were distressingly disturbed and dismayed at the startling realization that they were in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, I pray you. And they did so. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now, do not be distressed and disheartened or vexed and angry with yourself because you sold me here. For God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine had been in the land, there are still 5 more years in which there will be nothing plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a posterity and to continue a remnant on the earth, to save your life by a great escape and save you for many survivals. So now, it is not you who sent me here, But God, who has made me a father to Pharaoh and a lord to all of his house and the ruler over the land of Egypt. Can you see emotional intelligence? Hurry and go up to my father and tell him, your son Joseph says this to you. God has put me in charge of all of Egypt. Go down to me and do not delay. You will live in the land of Goshen, and you will be close to me. You and your children and your grandchildren and your flocks and your herds and all you have. For there I will sustain you and provide for you, so that you and your household and all that is yours may not come to poverty and want. For there are yet 5 years of scarcity, hunger, and starvation of famine. Now notice, your own eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin can see that I am talking to you personally in your language and not through an interpreter. You shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, of all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father down here. And he fell on his brother's Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers conversed with him. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brother had come, it pleased Pharaoh and his servants well. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers this, load your animals and return to the land of Canaan, and get your father and your household to come to me. And I will give you the best lands in the land of Egypt, and you will live on the fat of the land. You will therefore command them, saying, you do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Also, do not look with regret or concern upon your goods, for all the best of the land of Egypt is yours. And the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons, as the order of Pharaoh permitted, and gave them provisions for the journey. To each of them he gave changes of raiment, but to Benjamin he gave 30 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. And to his father he sent as follows: 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 sheep donkeys laden with grain, bread, and nourishing food and provision for his father, to supply all who were with him on the way. So he sent his brothers away, and they departed. And he said to them, see that you do not disagree or get excited or quarrel along the way. And they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan to Jacob their father. And they said to him, Joseph is still alive, and he is the governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart began to stop beating, and he almost fainted, and he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said to them, and when he saw the wagons, he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent him, the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived, and there was warmth and life, and it returned. And Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. See this, guys. This story, amazing, epic, like epic. I wish someone would literally put this into a movie. This is an amazing movie script, an amazing story. This reveal is the gen part. This part is gen. Joseph had emotional intelligence, right? Joseph showed forgiveness and mercy to his brothers. So they say, calm down. It's not you that sent me here. It's God that sent me ahead to preserve you guys. And then Joseph told them, don't quarrel among yourselves. Don't have this shame or guilt. There's no point. And past that stage, there's no point. See, guys. Joseph is somebody worth studying. And that study is what we are doing now. He didn't pay evil for evil. Instead, he showed them mercy. He showed them love. He showed them compassion. So much to learn from Joseph. And this is the penultimate of this story, because the last part will be part 4, which will be next Friday, and that will be when we'll conclude this story of Joseph, because we're concluding the story of Joseph next Friday, right? But there's so much to learn from this story, and I believe that you have learned a lot from this story. Has this been worth your while? Wow. Feel free to share your feedbacks in the comment. Share this with your friends, your followers, your enemies. Share with your enemies, so if you have any, they need to learn from Joseph. So in Joseph part 3, the 5 important lessons we've learned is: number 1, dream do come true. At 4 different times, the brothers had bowed down to Joseph. 4 different times. Dream do come true. Number 2, the recognition. Joseph recognized them even though they did not recognize it. Because 22 years have passed, but Joseph still recognized them. Number 3, repercussion. What they did to him, they felt the repercussion. Number 4, family. Joseph still treated them as family, regardless of what had happened. He still treated them as family. And number 5, the reveal. Joseph revealed himself to them, and that changed their story completely. Guys, this has been an amazing session of Joseph that we're talking about. And part 3 has just been phenomenal. Though just 5 lessons, but the 5 lessons were deep that we learned from chapter 42 to chapter 45 of the book of Genesis, where we get this story that we've discussed. I hope this has been worth your while. I hope that you have learned something. And I can't wait for me to see you in the concluding episode, Joseph part 4. That is the final episode on this series, and then we'll move into something else. Have you loved this series so far? Remember, we started with the Prodigal Son series, and we went into the series of Jabez, and we went to the series of Jonah, and now we are about to conclude by next week the series on Joseph. So many interesting series so far we've been having on this, our Upgrade Mastery, just for you. If there's a series that you want us to look into, let us know. We'll consider it. We'll probably be talking about the series that you want us to consider from Scripture, right? Like you always say, there's always more on the upgrade side of life. And that's why we encourage you to leave good behind so that you can upgrade. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you.